Good day and welcome back to another Dbz Dokkan Metal video. In this video we're going to be taking a look at the performance of TEQ LR Fusion Zamasu in the, well, I guess the easiest way to say it is in the Syn Shenron event. Now, Zamasu is pretty good. I think for most people who have him, they realize how good he is. But let's discuss why he's so good while we get to the final phase. Now there's a couple things about him that make him really solid. Firstly, leader skills pretty good. Realm of the Gods, Worldwide Chaos, Fuse Fighters, a bit wonky but pretty decent coverage across the board. You can incorporate some pretty weird units, but you've got a lot of the big hitters there. You may not have Strength Cooler and Terrifying Conquerors units, but you've got cells, perfect cells, very good perfect cells, all the other Zamasus. You've also got coverage with some of the Realm of the Gods units, and just in general you have a pretty decent team. Android 17, 18, there's some very good solid units here. Then he also covers Time Traveler's final trump card. This basically means most Fuse Fighters are also covered at 200%, so if you wanted to run Gogeta and Vegeta on this team, you probably could, which is really solid. Now in terms of his passive, what makes his passive so good? Well, he has that damage reduction received by 20% for 4 turns if there's a Realm of the Gods category ally. This isn't too hard to achieve, but he also has that additional 20% for the first turn. So that gives him 80% in the very first turn, which usually means he's pretty much your stock standard slot 1 tank during that time period. Not only that, but he has 40% damage reduction of his own, which means he's essentially AGL Golden Frieza for the first turn. It also means that for the next 2 turns he'll have 60% damage reduction, which helps him as well. Basically it kind of just links him up and lets him really just let you settle in. This is important because remember, he gains attack depending on how many times he's been hit, 25% up to a max of 150%. So by settling in and being able to take damage with his damage reduction, he's essentially guaranteed to get enough hits to really build up his attack. You can kind of see here that his attack stats not the craziest at the very beginning, but he's going to get hit a couple times and all of a sudden that attack stat's going to shoot up, which is very important. Now he does gain a buff when he is facing no Realm of the Gods category enemies. This is also pretty important because obviously it enables him to increase damage in this situation. He also has a high chance of performing critical hits, and there's a lot of red zone bosses that are not Realm of the Gods enemies, so basically he can get that prop quite often. Broly, Syn Shenron, the Shadow Dragons event, Omega Shenron from the GT edition, Metal Core Cooler, everyone's basically not a Realm of the Gods enemy except for probably the future one, so he's basically in good hands. In terms of raw output, he also has the active skill, where he becomes or creates the domain Infinite Zamasu, which raises extreme class characters key by 3 and lets him become omnipresent. This can be activated when HP is 70% or less, starting from the 5th turn, or the 7th turn if he's facing a Future Saga or has a Future Saga category ally on his team. In terms of link leveling, obviously Big Bad Bosses is kind of the big reference for him, but in reality the big deal for him is the fact that ultimately at the end of the day he's just a really good unit. There's not too much that you need to do to make him work. The most you have to do is get him hit 5 times. There's not a lot of requirements outside of that, or restrictions or placements or anything else. Now his defense doesn't get super high, but 40% damage reduction is generally on the side of what I would consider to be good. Anything above 30% starts to feel significant. 50% pseudo acts as guard, for example, so 40% is kind of nearing that curvature where damage reduction starts to get a bit crazy. Generally speaking, his weakest moment is before he fires a super attack or before he gets hit. When he gets hit, he gains 50% damage reduction, and this is pretty big for him, or 50% defense. This is pretty big for him. He's got 180k defense, he gains another 90k, pushing him to the 270 bracket, and that also helps him to fire off an additional super, which in turn allows him to really stack up that defense with his greatly raising defense. And after super, you're looking at a unit that has over the 400k defense mark, whilst also having 40% damage reduction. This is generally considered pretty good. This will get you through a lot of situations, it will make him relatively tanky. There are going to be situations where he's going to take damage. You know, if he's facing like an int unit that's going to fire off huge attack stats at him, he's not going to come out big time happy. But he will be good. He'll be solid in most situations against normals, against a lot of unit super attacks. But yeah, his weakest point or his weakest avenue is going to be when he's got that reduction, when he's got that period where he doesn't have that defense activated and he's only got his 40% damage reduction. He can be caught out a little bit there. So worst case scenario for him is a first time super, so he's not a perfect tank, but he's pretty close to being a very excellent tank. The infinite Zamasu transformations where things get really interesting, because there he can't take damage. He nullifies all attacks directed at him for 5 turns, and he has attack of 300%, it's AoE attacks, and he also changes orbs, which is pretty big. Now if you pick up 4 more TEQ key spheres, you also give the rest of your team, or at least your world class category allies, 60% defense on that turn. So it's all pretty big. Honestly speaking, it's stuff that just makes him function really, really well. As a unit, he kind of sits at the point where you go, okay, what is it that he can't do? Obviously, at 55%, the evaluation is always going to be different to at a rainbow level. But I think the good thing about Zamasu, at least for me, where I like to see him or where I see him lying, I just see him functioning as a really good kind of cornerstone to a lot of teams. He is a very good pseudo first slot tank in most situations. A lot of situations he's the perfect second slot unit. His leader skill covers a lot of ground for extreme units. Big Bad Bosses is relatively easy to implement, and overall his link set is relatively easy to facilitate as well. He doesn't have a huge, issue with facilitating his passive or his link set. He's traditionally just a very solid option in that regard. Getting hit a couple times is not an issue for him early on. That enables him to get his full out attack stat, and once he has that out, he's really good. After super, his defense is more than primed and more than acceptable. And yeah, overall he just looks really good. The big issue right now is the rest of his team, and when I say rest of his team, I'm talking specifically the Syn Shenron event. His team is pretty good. I mean, you can see all of these units we're using are good units. Obviously in the Syn Shenron event, we sit in a situation where, okay, we do have to accept the fact that, we are taking damage from the int characters. With that being said, and that being noted, it is also important to understand that this is the only event whereby this team is at a true disadvantage, because we're taking a lot of damage before our units can get off a lot of their excess defense. Now, obviously, when we talk about units doing really, really well, the big thing with TEQ Fusion Zamasu is that he can enable the rest of this team. I think if you replace a couple of these int units, this team clears Syn Shenron pretty easily, and Fusion Zamasu is a big component of that. You've seen him handle everything quite well. You're going to see his domain effect come into effect next turn, and you're going to see the benefits of that. He's great. Nothing wrong with him. Team needs to be adjusted to represent the event he's in, but the good thing is he's got a very malleable skill. For example, you can run Strength Cooler at 180% lead underneath him. This isn't perfect, but it's definitely pretty close to being really rock solid, and for me personally, I think he sits in a very good position. Are there things I'd like to change? Yes. I think I'd like to change his name. I think people are trying really hard to change his name, and the reason they're doing that is to accommodate that in Zamasu. I think that's a very important part. Them being a duo would be really solid for this team. So I do think that's something that needs to be addressed. But outside of that, honestly, he's just great. Love him to bits. Think he's awesome. And yeah, I think overall, he's a really good unit. I think they did him really well. Animations are done to a good quality. Obviously, maybe not as exciting as Vegito's, but yeah, very good. Excellent stuff. So that's pretty much going to be it for me. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. And yeah, of course, I will see you guys in the next one. But until then, yeah, as I say, I'll see you guys next time. There you go, notification. Unfortunately, just with too much damage on the other units. But yeah, at the end of the day, I think he's great. But that's going to be it for me. I will definitely see you guys in the next one. Bye.